make sense!
Making sense 98.3% of the time, according to the Home Office in Wichita, Kansas. They've been polling people, I think, since the year 2018, 2017. When did I start this channel? National polls every week prove to be right 98.6% of the time. I love Monday mornings. I'm going golfing. I got a tee time at 12:45. That's 3 hours. So I should stop 2.5 hours from now. So I'm willing to talk for 2.5 hours. My voice is all froggy and stuff. I was up early this morning. I had to take my son to school. Usually he drives himself, but today... So I usually get to sleep in a little bit, but this morning I had to get up early. A lot of people are stupid. Did you guys know that 50% of the population has an IQ below 50? I mean, not 50, 100. Actually, what percentage is below 50? I hope not. And people didn't get this video I made about Matt Dillahunty and Daniel. Takes some thinking required. I don't know if I should play the whole thing here or get to the... it's short enough, right?
Have sex with another 9-year-old boy? What if a 9-year-old wants to have sex with another 9-year-old boy? Do we have laws? Should we have laws that prevent that?
This isn't about.
Should we? Oh, now it's not about 9-year-olds. Okay.
I'm sorry. Do I get to answer your question?
Yes, please answer.
Are you going to ask it and answer?
Are you in favor of laws that would ban a 9-year-old girl from sleeping with a 9-year-old boy? Yes or no?
We don't have
yes
law.
or no.
You know what? I like this by Daniel because Matt does the exact same thing to Theus all the time. Yes or no? I do this often. If you're going to give it, you got to be willing to take it. Now, I like to think that when someone asks me yes or no questions, I answer quickly yes or no. Now, there's probably, whenever you ask a yes or no question, unless it's very, very simple, which I try to keep my yes or no questions simple, and this one I think is simple, there's always some hidden assumptions in a question like this. And so you can answer quickly and then given this assumption I agree with, this assumption I don't agree with. But yeah, Matt, if you're going to ask yes or no questions and then tell people to shut up if they start bloviating, then you got to do the same thing. And he eventually does. He catches himself. He's so smart guy. Matt's no dummy. So he realizes he has to answer.
Okay, one more time, since you're going to do the yes or no thing, like one more time with the question. Am I in favor of laws that would ban that? No.
Okay. So you don't have a problem with 9-year-olds having sex?
That's a lie, and you are the most dishonest person I've ever engaged with. You just
the most dishonest person he's ever engaged with. He's engaged with a lot of people. You must have a dishonesty meter. I got my lighting is a little weird here. Is that better? Yeah.
Forced me to answer yes or no to a question about whether or not I would advocate for a law. And then when I said that I would not advocate for the law, you suggested I don't have a problem with it. I have massive problems with it.
This right here was the issue I was getting at. Right here. And most people missed it. Let me replay it.
I would not advocate for the law. You suggested I don't have a problem with it. I have massive problems with it.
What does he have massive problems with? For people from South Dakota, what does Matt have massive problems with? What does he have massive problems with? 2 9-year-olds having coitus.
You're the one that doesn't have a problem with it.
Apparently
which is
not
why
enough
this
to
is the
suggest
only
legislation.
Debate we are ever going to do. And I don't care if you lie about my views. Don't fuck kids.
Okay, where'd this come from? Don't have kids. It's coming from a previous debate, I think. I watched most of this debate. But the question was 2 9-year-olds. So I don't know if Matt was thinking when he said he had massive problems. Was he talking about with adults having sex with kids? Because I have massive problems with that too. Or does he also have massive problems with 2 kids having sex? I honestly don't know the answer to that. If his brain was thinking about something else when he, out of the blue, brings in a man or a woman and a kid. But Daniel made a great point here, that if you have massive problems with something, why wouldn't you legislate against it? like massive problems, you would say, yeah, maybe we should have a law against it if you have massive problems against it. So this is what I was getting at with this video, was the consistency of having massive problems with one thing and maybe not the other. I should have done voice.
What if a 9-year-old wants to have puberty blockers that may sterilize a 9-year-old boy? Do we have laws? Should we have laws that prevent that?
This isn't about.
Should we? Oh, now it's not about 9-year-olds. Okay.
I'm sorry. Do I get to answer your question?
Yes, please answer.
Are you going to ask it and answer?
Are you in favor of laws that would ban a 9-year-old boy from puberty blockers that could potentially sterilize him? Yes or no?
We don't have
Yes
law.
or no?
Okay, one more time, since you're going to do the yes or no thing. Like one more
By the way, the AI was perfect for Daniel's voice, not so perfect for Matt's.
time with the question. Am I in favor of laws that would ban that? No.
So you don't have a problem with sterilizing kids?
That's a lie, and you are the most dishonest person I've ever engaged with.
But this is about how it would go if I changed the words, right? If they actually said this, like you see this all the time you wouldn't legislate against puberty blockers for 9, 10, 11-year-olds, so you don't have a problem with it. This is about how the conversation would go, right?
You just forced me to answer yes or no to a question about whether or not I would advocate for a law. And then when I said that I would not advocate for the law, you suggested I don't have a problem with it. I have massive problems with it. You're the one that doesn't have a problem with it.
Apparently
which is
not
why
enough
this
to
is the
suggest
only
legislation.
debate we are ever going to do.
So this is the question I posed on the table that most people didn't get. If you had a choice between, if you had to answer this question, what do you have more massive problems with? 2 9-year-olds having coitus, or blocking puberty completely? Blocking puberty completely of a 9 to 11-year-old. Some kids actually start puberty very early. My daughter started puberty, I think, at age 11. And if your goal is to block puberty, you have to start basically just before puberty starts to block it completely. If your goal is to block it completely. Now, a lot of people said, did I?
And I don't care if you lie about my views. Don't
sterilize
kids.
Some people complain about that blocking puberty doesn't sterilize. If you block puberty completely, you are sterilizing kids. A lot of people said, no, Doug, that's not true. This is just a right-wing talking point. So I figured a lot of people appreciate Arden. I thought Arden could tell you for herself. That it indeed does sterilize kids.
Straight. Do you know what they give when they give puberty blockers, correct? Do you know the drug that they're given?
Yeah, do you know the entire...
It's called Lupron.
I'm familiar.
You know
I was on Lupron.
Okay, do you know what Lupron is historically used for?
Yes, Lupron is used for precocious puberty historically.
And medically castrating sex offenders.
Sure.
Yeah, no pushback from her.
It can be used for that. However,
okay, I have one other question.
Wait, hold on.
Hang on.
Okay,
yeah, you don't just get to barrel through with all your propaganda points.
Please.
Propaganda points. So far, everything this gentleman said, Arden agrees with.
Please, Chris, don't make me mute you. We're answering your questions. We're trying to be here, but I know that you said you were nervous, but it's like...
I am.
It's like you're so desperate to get to a point and use your buzzwords about chemical castration, which doesn't apply.
It's not buzzwords.
It is a fucking buzzword. Now I'm going to mute you, and you're going to sit there quietly while Arden explains why it's a buzzword.
It'd be nice if Matt was a little more dead inside. I mean, he could be so more effective. But I guess a lot of people like when he gets passionate.
And everything else, because you can't shut up when somebody's answering the question you
have. When Lupron is used for a period of longer than 2 years, after that point be a statistically significant risk of infertility.
There it is. So if you use Lupron for more than 2 years, which is what you would need to do if you want to completely block puberty, there's a statistically significant risk, like whether it's 90%, 95, 85, it's way above 50 risk that you're going to sterilize that child.
However, when used within the typical treatment parameters for transition care, it's within 2 years. All of those risks, well, all of the risks that exist, like for any medicine, can apply before the guidelines because humans have very diverse biology.
Yeah, so what Arden's saying here is that they try to keep it under 2 years because they know the risk of sterilization. But if you keep it under 2 years, you're not probably not fully completing the blockage of puberty for many people.
And sometimes they can deviate from the population expectation. But generally speaking, within 2 years of use, if you either go off of Lupron and then resume your natal endogenous puberty or hormones.
See, but then you're not blocking puberty, right? So what Arden's talking about is that you're kind of slowing down puberty. You on it for less than 2 years, you go off it, and then you let your normal puberty take over. And then if it's going too fast, you block it a little bit more, you suppress it a little bit more, you suppress your puberty and unrighteousness.
Most of the time, there is no long-term risk to fertility.
Most of the time.
But
even then, under 2 years, you can risk fertility, is what I'm hearing her say.
Yeah, and if it's going longer than that, that's because they're intentionally using it to try to affect someone's sexual desires. But that's not what's happening when kids are being treated for puberty blockers. They are specifically being used within a certain guideline frame to get them to a point where they can either decide to stop or move on to cross-sex hormones.
Yeah, or move on. So if they don't stop and they move on and they completely block the puberty, there's as she said earlier, a statistical significant risk of sterilization. Now, some people would say, well, so what? Who cares? And this is where reasonable people, and I'll say this, reasonable people can disagree on this issue and say it is far better to block puberty completely than someone to go through pain and turmoil for the rest of their life because they've gone through the puberty because they have this idea that they were born in the wrong body. And reasonable people can disagree on this. What is better? And they would say something like, let me steel man them. The parents, doctors, and the patient all get together and they evaluate what is the best route to take. And that if it's extreme enough, the dysphoria, and there's a high risk of suicide, let's say, that it is better to risk sterility, block puberty completely, than go through the rest of their life having gone. You can't take puberty back if you go through it. It's better to block it than go through the rest of your life without the puberty that you would have gone through. That's still manning them. How did I do? That's pretty good, right? That's pretty generous and nice. Now, here's my take. My take is that in order to block puberty, you got to be pre-puberty in age, which nowadays is pre-12 years old. The diagnosis of dysphoria, transgender, is self-reported. You ought not, as a reasonable human being, in my opinion, take the word of a child. No, you shouldn't. Especially if you're trying to predict what they're going to be like 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. You should not trust. This is why a lot of people are going to really disagree with me. But in this field of expertise, you should not trust your doctor. This is where people are going to flip out. Actually, in Europe, doctors in this field are changing their minds on this issue. America has to catch up on it. So let me give credit to some of these doctors in this field. But these doctors they can't see the future. They're not infallible. They're not gods. And again, there's no test. You can't pee in a vial and take and shake a little thing and say, oh yeah, you got dysphoria. Oh yeah, You're transgender. There's no machine. There's no way to verify. Kids are often confused. They often do have body dysmorphia. They're confused. No, you do not make lifelong decisions based on what a kid says. And doctors are figuring this out in other parts of the world. Even in America, it's happening. A lot of people don't even want me to talk about this because every time I do, I change people's minds on this. Because what I'm saying is very reasonable. It's like, why do you keep talking about this? I do change people's minds on this issue. More so than the other way around. Because what I'm saying is very reasonable. Yeah, Uber. It's amazing. I think maybe it's the fluoride in the water, right? Kids are starting puberty earlier and earlier. I think even Joe Rogan said this, like when he was talking about trans years ago, he would get so much pushback. And then he said at one point, people stopped pushing back against him. And it's because every time Joe Rogan talked about this issue, people started changing their minds on this because he had such a big reach. And so they figured, let's just be quiet now. Like, don't. And I've actually noticed this a little bit on my channel too. People have stopped pushing back on me on this issue because they know every time I talk about it, they kind of lose. But let's get to the rest of, oh yeah, this. I gotta congratulate David Pakman. He had Dennis Prager on, and I loved it. I didn't watch all of it, but I watched most of it. And I think this is great because these two guys disagree politically on many issues. They're both Jewish. I didn't know that, but David Pakman says he's Jewish here in this video. And like, I'm just thinking to myself, would Rationality Rules ever do this? Would he ever sit down and have a civil conversation with Dennis Prager? Like at this point, he's called him a liar and like basically a filthy rag so many times that he and his followers are almost like you can't associate with him. But not David Pakman. David Pakman, kudos to you. Good job. And maybe I'll play this. But let's get to this debate. I don't know, like it's 3.5 hours long. Let me try to summarize it. They talked about three main issues. Is God real? Does God exist? Is what's better for society, religion or secular humanism? But what was the second one? Anybody help me out? I'm doing this from memory. I forget the second one. But with the way Daniel handled this about does God exist, he went straight to the epistemology that in order to answer the question, does God exist, we got to come up with some metric, some way of coming to know. Like, what's our epistemology to answer that question? And very smart people who I've talked to in the past will use the same strategy against me. And Daniel used it against Matt. And it's not a bad strategy, because if you say that the best way to come to knowledge is through something like the scientific method, then the theist is never going to win. Or some theists might push back on me on that. But in my opinion, the theists are never going to win. I think Matt would be on my side here to say that God exists. In fact, theists themselves say you cannot put God in a test tube. You cannot test God in that way. And so what Daniel did was question the epistemology of how we come to know whether an entity like God exists. And if you are stubborn and stuck in this idea of it can only be the scientific method because it's the most reliable, then no matter what I say going forward, says Daniel and the other theists, you're not going to accept. And I like this because it saves a lot of time. But what I would appreciate if what theists would do who use this method that Daniel used is to say, okay, we can't agree on a reliable epistemology on the topic of God, so then let's just forget about it. Let's just move on to something else. Which they did. They talked about things like what's better for society. I think it actually is better just to agree to disagree on this. People who've known me for years, when I was on Blab, there was this Roman Catholic guy, what was his name, who had podcasts, or he was on radio, and he and I had several conversations, and he talked to his radio audience, like tens of thousands of people, about me, and pray for Doug, pray for PineCreek. But he would say the same as a Roman Catholic, a traditional Roman Catholic. He's basically said the same things that Daniel said in this debate. That there are ways to know that God exists that have nothing to do with the scientific method. And unless you're open to that, you're never going to know that God's real. And I think at this point, there's nothing the atheists can say other than just agree to disagree. You can give examples, you can give defeaters, and I think Matt did in this debate, where people have spiritual experiences and say, I know God's real, and then person B says, I know God's real through these spiritual experiences. But then when you can look at these two gods, they're contradictory. They both can't be real. So in Matt's mind and my mind, I'm going, this is a terrible way to come to know. But then the general theist could say, well, they might be wrong on the nature of this God, but they're not wrong that this God exists. They just don't know exactly what this God's like. What do I want to play here?
Only a few years away from the Charlie Hebdo attacks, where people went in with guns and killed satirists for mocking Prophet Muhammad. Never in my life would I'm
Yeah, so this is the section about what's better for society.
not an artist. I had no inclination to draw Muhammad or anyone else. As soon as you tell me that I can't, I will. And I did. And I posted it. Not an offensive, nothing. It was just a normal tracing of an individual that was represented as Muhammad, and I drew it. Was that wrong of me? Was it wrong of me to draw an image of someone that doesn't make any sort of quality or quantitative assessment about them at all?
Yeah, Muslims, I hope, can understand. Muslims in the West, I think, understand this, most of them, that it seems totally bizarre that drawing a picture of a certain character or person in history causes so much outrage. This is why I think even atheists who disagree with my stance that we should be more dead inside, they're going to agree with me on this one. Muslims, you need to be more dead inside when it comes to drawing pictures of the Prophet Muhammad. Like if people were less emotional about things that they deeply believe, I mean, so many wars could be stopped.
I just did something because a religious group said I couldn't, and they killed some other people for doing it. Between 1979 and 2019, Islamists, hashtag not all Muslims, have been followed by terrorist watch groups and committed 35,000 attacks with 160,000 deaths. That doesn't exist for secular humanism. Not only does it not exist, I'm not aware of any secular humanist organization that has ever been on any terrorist watch list or hate group watch list. And yet that can't be said for Islam, and it can't be said for Christianity. Plenty of groups attached to both religions are in there. Which one's worse? Flip a coin. Primarily, it depends on which one's in
I wonder if Matt would consider Antifa part of secular humanism.
power, or which one is struggling to gain power. None of that stuff exists within secular humanism. And it doesn't exist primarily because of foundational principles of autonomy, freedom, and consent. And that is, I permit all of you to believe as your conscience dictates and to act in accordance with what your conscience dictates, right up to the point where your rights and freedoms come in conflict with someone else. And that is the point which a government is justified in stepping in. The founders of the United States created a constitution that was a living document, and they had a notion of separation of religion and government, sometimes called separation of church
Best constitution in the world, in my opinion. Although I haven't read too many other constitutions.
and state. They didn't write it in there expressly, but it was included in the letter to Danbury Baptist. The Constitution of the United States was unanimously, or the Treaty of Tripoli was unanimously ratified, saying the United States is in no way founded on Christianity. And yet Christianity is the dominant religion here and is the cornerstone of many ideas of the broken parts of the United States of America. And when we throw out consent,
Well, let's be fair, and the good parts.
when we say, in order for you to be a good person,
Hospitals.
you are not allowed to leave the house without somebody else with you. You're not allowed to leave the house without wearing some garment covering you. You are not allowed to engage in the sort of love that you would like to engage with another person, even though it doesn't harm anybody else. You don't get to consent to whether or not you're going to be married. You are property of a God, no matter which God. You diminish humanity.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I agree with everything Matt's saying here. In Judaism, I think, Islam, even some forms of Christianity, women are property. Just read the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not covet. It gives a list of things. Oxen, wives. Wives are in the same category as oxen as property. But let me do the flip side. Like the whole thing Matt said, you can't go out in public without a male chaperone. I think he alluded to that in many Muslim cultures. Probably fewer women go missing in Muslim countries than in United States. I'm not sure about this, but I bet you fewer women are raped in Muslim countries than in the United States. It's a trade-off. If you're going to be honest, it's a trade-off. Like when my daughter goes out, my wife, to big events, I prefer to be there, being the protector, even though I'm an old guy with a bad knee. But the other guys don't know that. They don't know if I've taken martial arts. I mean, I don't believe God exists. I don't believe God has anything to do. There's a God that has anything to do with the Quran or the Old Testament, New Testament. But these are people who came up with ideas to help protect women. Because men knew how other men think. And so they make these laws like chaperones in Saudi Arabia. If you want to steel man them and find the best in them, this is why they do it. Yeah, this is a new thing about ads. And I got to figure out if there's a way to stop it. But it seems like YouTube is putting ads in live streams now.
Sacrifice everything that we value as humans about our liberty and freedom, the right to be here and govern our own lives to the best we can. You sacrifice everything on the altar of an idea that you cannot prove and that objectively, demonstrably results in harm for people.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks for that opening, Matt. We'll kick it over to Daniel for his 10-minute opening as well. Daniel, thanks for being with us. The floor is all yours.
Pull down the virtual reality helmet, plug in a few diodes into the skull that tap into the pleasure centers of the brain. You pull the switch and then pure unadulterated bliss. The brain implants and the VR are so powerful that any pleasurable experience you want to have, you can have it. You can satisfy basic bodily pleasures, but the tech is so advanced that you can simulate any desire. You want to vacation on the beach with supermodels? No problem. You want to travel the world and sample cuisine from every region? No problem. Every form of pleasure and entertainment is now at your fingertips.
It's kind of ironic he's talking about pleasure and saying secular humanists are all about pleasure when Islam is a religion where you promise how many virgins? 72 virgins when you die? Isn't that about pleasure? See, this is the thing. There isn't much difference between religions like Islam, Christianity, and secular humanism when it comes to what motivates people. It's about pain and pleasure. It's about rewards and punishments. Like, do atheists and theists like this realize that we're not that different? The main differences are that one is after death, mostly. That's when the real pain and real pleasure begins. And one's here on earth. But the fundamental, what drives people, I think theists and atheists agree. Now, there are virtue ethics out there, and people say, you know, whether there's pain or pleasure or not, people ought to do the right thing, the good thing. Yeah, I agree, that exists.
Machine comes on market and is heavily advertised. People start using it for recreation on the weekends, but the machine works too well. People can't get themselves off of it. Eventually, pleasure machine users are strapped in for 10, 15, even 20 hours a day. They can't stop using it. The constant supply of dopamine is too much to resist. Before the pleasure machine, people had time for their extended families. People would get together with aunts, uncles, cousins. If you had elderly parents, you would take care of them. If you had grandparents, you could spend time with them. But as more people get hooked on the pleasure machine, there's no time for extended family. And let's be honest, what's more fun, fulfilling any fantasy or sitting and talking with grandma? As the pleasure machine continues to spread...
Actually, I enjoy talking to my grandma. You learn a lot of things. See, this is what my dad instilled, and my mom and dad instilled in me at a very young age, is we would go to family gatherings often, and I was constantly exposed to people who I was related to that were much older than me. And to me, I think that is healthier than spending time with people your own age when you're a kid. Kids are actually terrible at being good role models. Some adults are better.
The whole concept of extended family dies off. People only have time for their spouse and their kids, but even this nuclear family gradually becomes too much of a burden. The only thing that people want to do is to plug themselves in. Over time, pleasure machines get a bad reputation for disrupting families, and sales start to drop. Pleasure Inc. realizes it needs a new strategy. First of all, let's improve the machine so that people don't have to worry about unplugging themselves to eat. Anything the body needs biologically can now be supplied by the machine so that hypothetically you can stay plugged in nonstop. Second, let's get the government to subsidize the machines. We want to make sure that anyone who wants a pleasure machine can afford to get one, even if it takes government assistance. Third, more aggressive marketing techniques are needed. People who oppose the pleasure machine say that it destroys marriage, destroys families. Now they're even saying it destroys cultures and religions because maintaining culture or religious traditions requires people to make an effort, to work hard, to make personal sacrifice.
So he's setting up this dichotomy in a sense of the difference between secular humanists and good religious people like him is that secular humanists are all about pleasure, not about family, not about self-sacrifice. And good Muslims like himself are for those things: self-sacrifice, family, tradition. Well, Daniel, I'm an atheist. And I agree with you on a lot of things. That happiness is overrated. That you should often do things for your family that you don't want to do as a man. Now, I still think, though, that there's a part of me that does it for selfish reasons. In the long run, I think I feel better knowing I've produced 2 kids that are productive members of society, who love their family, who do good to others. So all that self-sacrifice while they're growing up will pay dividends in the end.
Not to mention maintain bonds with others. How can you do any of that if you're strapped into a pleasure machine for most of the hours of the day? In the beginning, religious people used the machines, and then sometimes they'd miss prayers, sometimes they'd miss going to church. Then they start missing major holidays like fasting and Ramadan and other important cultural communal rituals. So the opponents of the pleasure machines now claim that the product not only destroys marriage, family, and culture, but also community and religion. How do we counter that?
Aaron says secular humanism has nothing to do with this scenario, Doug. Well, I disagree. I think just based on polling numbers, if you ask marriage rates, having kids, the typical family unit, and find the percentages of that family unit among secular humanists versus the religious, what do you think is higher? Let's be honest. There's a higher percentage of family units among the religious than the secular humanists. Right? The religious people definitely reproduce more, right?
That in our marketing. Well, it's hard to deny the accusation, so let's embrace it. Let's tell people that the pleasure machine is actually liberating people from the shackles. Marriage, family, community, and religion are all sources of so much toil and headache. Why bother with that when you can enjoy limitless pleasure? The pleasure machine is the great liberator. Further,
okay, so he talks about this for a while.
if anyone opposes our product, we simply... But every nation must allow their citizens to buy a pleasure machine. Access to pleasure machines remain for 18 hours a day. Not even all essentially pushing the pleasure machine.
How many times does he say pleasure machine? Let's get to the discussion.
Streaming all of those debates live for the public. With that, we're going to jump into open dialogue. Gentlemen, the floor is all yours.
I didn't know secular humanism was a totalitarian. What? Because we are currently out of straw after that straw man and oil after it got pushed down that slippery slope. In what has to be the biggest grandstanding, whining misrepresentation of secular humanism and cancel culture that I've ever heard. Cancel culture, by the way, is the real whine here, but it's not about canceling, it's about accountability. And it seems strange to call secular humanism as, oh, it's just about pleasure and everything else. And if you dare to say something like it's okay to forcibly marry a 4-year-old, they're just going to call you awful. They're going to say, are you a child predator? It's okay. It's okay. We don't need to cancel anything. We don't need to ban the pleasure machine. The pleasure machine will either kill us off, or climate change will, or work out ourselves. So since we're supposed to be having a discussion and I have to ask a question to start with, I'll start with my first question. One of the first questions I thought of, which I thought of before we ever got here. Is Islam encouraging terrorism, or is it just really inept at stopping it from its adherents?
Okay, let me respond to certain things. Like if we want to talk about terrorism, okay, the values of secular humanism, like the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of individual happiness, that was the basis of the French Revolution. That was the basis of the American Revolution. That was the basis of the Communist Revolution, the Decembrist Revolution. All of these
He's not wrong.
revolutions that were explicitly on the basis of reason and improving human happiness on the basis of reason and overthrowing religion. That is the ideological basis of all of those movements that ended up killing hundreds of thousands of people. Obviously, you are not going to consider them to be terrorists. That's very convenient for you. But the people who are being killed by these groups...
It's interesting thought that the early Americans in the United States are a form of terrorists against England. Like, I don't know. Did people in England view the early Americans as terrorists?
Groups did consider them to be terrorists. The regimes that were displaced by these groups did consider them to be terrorists, but the winners are able to write history. You keep bringing up like this point about 4-year-olds. This is like a straw man that was put forth in a previous debate. Nowhere did I say that a 4-year-old should be, in a sexual relationship. It was a hypothetical that was presented to me, and I answered that on the basis of the hypothetical that was presented. Nowhere did I say that, oh yeah, 4-year-olds go through puberty and therefore they should be sexually active.
So you're saying that's a hypothetical 4-year-old who went through precocious puberty, it would be okay to have sex with them because that's what you said in the debate.
So we can go through what I said in that debate from...
Yeah, I think he did say that, right? Like, you shouldn't be scared to answer the hypothetical. So I guess, according to Daniel, if a 4-year-old is going through full puberty, I think Michael asked them, should they be married and have sex? And I think Daniel said yes. And then everybody goes, right? I think, but we all know that in all recorded history, no 4-year-old has gone through puberty.
The beginning, but I thought you want to stick on the topic of the debate.
Well, I'm just saying you're now denying that you said what we all heard you say, which got popularized over the internet because Mike specifically asked if a 4-year-old goes through precocious puberty. Under your version of what Allah permits, is it permissible?
Has there ever been a 4-year-old gone through puberty? I don't think so. Or maybe I'm wrong.
To marry and have sex with her? And your answer was yes.
No, the point that I put to that person in that debate was that if we accept that someone is going through puberty, that means that the person is going to desire sexual relations. They're going to desire to be sexually active. And that is a biological fact. It just doesn't happen at 4 years old. It happens at 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And that's why when we look at American culture and Western culture, the children at that age are highly sexually active. That's the reality in the world today. So you, or I won't say you because I don't know what your views are, but the person that I was debating has no problem in there being, this laissez-faire attitude towards children 9, 10.
Oh, Matthew Nitt says, yes, the youngest pregnant girl ever was 5 years, 7 months. Really? Wow. That is a freak of nature. I find that hard to believe. Sorry, Matthew. Youngest girl to be pregnant. I gotta fact check you on this. Lina Marcela Mendina de Jurado is a Peruvian woman who became the youngest confirmed mother in history. She gave birth on May 14th at age 5. Wow. 1939. Can we trust this? 1939. I mean, they didn't even have the internet back then. But I guess that's right.
11 or even younger, being active with sexual dating, going to prom, going to these kinds of dances, boyfriend, girlfriend, fornicating, that is all allowed. So you don't have a problem, or people who are scoffing and laughing, they don't have a problem with 9-year-olds having sex. They just have a problem with the idea of a 9-year-old getting married. That was the point of that debate, and we don't have to rehash it.
Well, I think, Mike Jones, if you're watching.
Yeah, so it is so weird. Because the year is 2023. This is why I don't believe in objective morality, because I believe morality evolves. Whether it evolves constantly to a better state is up for the debate. But I kind of get a little upset, even though I'm more dead inside than you guys, when people use arguments of slavery and with Islam, this child brides, for 2,000 years ago, cultures 2,000 years ago. Now, I get the argument. The argument is if there's this God, creator God out there that is the standard for objective morality, then surely he would have said, hey, everybody, don't own people as property. Hey, everybody, don't take women as property and child brides and that sort of thing. You would think this God would say something like that because our moral intuitions today say that. And if God has put the moral intuitions on our hearts, this is what we would expect. By the way, what I just said is a great argument against Islam, Judaism, Christianity. And many people have made the same argument before. But as atheists listening to this, surely we understand that 2,000, 3,000 years ago, people were basically like baboons. Hairy backs, making bad choices compared to how we view morality today. And there was no safety, social safety nets. There wasn't democracies, at least not in these religions. And the way people survived was through slavery, was through child brides. Children were bequeathed to rich, wealthy men in order to protect the daughter. You think the fathers were crazy and they said, hey, here's my daughter, do what you want with her? No, I think fathers still cared about their kids back then, but they realized that by doing this business deal transaction, the well-being of the girl is actually better than current. And that says a lot, right? When you're willing to give up your 9-year-old or 6-year-old, whatever, to a man, it says how bad your situation is. Things were horrible back then. Too bad a creator God doesn't exist and would announce to everybody, hey, consider having a representative republic or democracy. Maybe have a few social nets, set up this type of government, a structure. Instead of just slowly nudging over 2,000 years, just give the guideline. In fact, God could have foresaw what Jefferson would have wrote the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton, and said, hey, you know, these guys in the future, they're going to come up with this. I'm going to give it to you now as a template of how you can run your societies. Trust me, it's going to help you. But no, this God was silent. Is society better now than 1,000 years ago? Definitely. Definitely. Is there anybody here who would take a time machine and want to live 1,000 years ago? I don't think anybody here would want to do that.
Watching, I think Daniel just suggested that you're okay with 9-year-olds engaging in sexual activity. And I want to verify that, because if that is true, if that's true, Mike, you're as repugnant as Daniel is. But I don't think that's true.
So do you think we should have a ban on 9-year-olds dating?
Here it is.
What counts as dating?
What if a 9-year-old wants to have sex with another 9-year-old boy? Do we have laws? Should we have laws that prevent that?
This isn't about.
Should we? Oh, now it's not about 9-year-olds. Okay.
I'm sorry. Do I get to answer your question?
Yes, please answer. Are you in favor of laws that would ban a 9-year-old?
So the question is, why is Daniel even asking this question? Like, really think about what's going through Daniel's head.
Girl from sleeping with a 9-year-old boy? Yes or no?
We don't have
yes
law.
or no.
Okay, one more time, since you're going to do the yes or no thing. Like, one more time with the question. Am I in favor of laws that would ban that? No.
Okay. So you don't have a problem with 9-year-olds having sex?
That's a lie.
See, now, I think Daniel knows this is a mistake to assume that just because you're against the law doesn't mean you're against the behavior. I asked my wife this the other day, last night, a few hours ago. I asked her, should adults transition? Should there be a law against adults transitioning? She said, no. Now, my wife is an evangelical, born-again Christian. She said, no, there shouldn't be a law against that. Then I asked her, are adults transitioning? Is that a sin? Is that bad? Is that immoral? She said, yes. So there's a clear example, Daniel, if you're listening, where someone can be against the law and still say the behavior is bad, but it shouldn't be legislated. By the way, this is why I'm not scared about Christian nationalism, because my wife is fairly conservative, but she's for the freedoms. I think in her view would be people should be free to sin. Now, there's certain sins that she would say should be against the law, other sins not. And this is where reasonable people can disagree.
And you are the most dishonest person I've ever engaged with. You just forced me to answer yes or no to a question about whether or not I would advocate for a law. And then when I said that I would not advocate for the law, you suggested I don't have a problem with it. I have massive problems with it.
There it is again. This is what I don't understand. Like, I'm against 9-year-olds having coitus too. And most 9-year-olds can't get pregnant. But even if, assuming they can't get pregnant, I would still, this is very icky to me. But I think a lot of pre-puberty kids will they can't even have coitus. Like they can, I guess, simulate the act. I don't want to be too graphic here, but I can think of, even though I'm not for it, I can think of so many behaviors amongst Homo sapiens that are way, way worse than 2 9-year-olds simulating coitus or having coitus. Right? Isn't that reasonable? Like, murder is way worse. Rape is way worse. And in the video I made, I proposed that even puberty blockers are way worse. And then this is where we can reasonably disagree.
You're the one that doesn't have a problem with it.
Apparently not enough to suggest legislation.
Debate we are ever going to do. And I don't care if you lie about my views. Don't fuck kids.
See, and this is where did this come from? Like, it has to come from a previous debate and not to Daniel's question.
So tell the people in this country that are following secular humanism. Tell them they need to hear it more than anyone.
Secular
humanists who are
secular humanists. I'm telling you, don't fuck kids and don't advocate for it. Yeah, and maybe they need the secular humanists say.
Are you sure about that, Matt?
Why would we
advocating for child love? I'd be careful, Matt.
We do that.
Maybe they need to follow
that. Nobody's ever done that.
Maybe they need to follow
It's you that have done that on stage.
The sexual revolution that had. From
secular
humanist
revolution was not about 9-year-olds.
Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't.
You don't know about the Sexual Liberation Front? You don't know about NAMBLA? You don't know about all of these?
I know about NAMBLA, and we've worked against NAMBLA.
Jeff, I've never had a video removed for saying the word rape. So we can test it. Rape. Let's see if YouTube does anything.
Ambla.
Yes. Look at the
Unlike you.
theorists. Stop interrupting me, okay? You got it. You got it
No,
out.
the no interruption shit is done when you start
Yeah.
talking about whether or not 9-year-olds should be fucking.
Don't grandstand, okay? You're not some hero.
Yeah, see, I agree with Matt on so many things, but I agree with Daniel here. I think this is a bit of grandstanding. This is, in my opinion, disproportional moral outrage for 2 9-year-olds having coitus. Am I wrong? Like, but let's be fair to Matt. If in his head he's thinking of an adult having coitus with a child, then I can understand the outrage. But 2 9-year-olds? Bad, granted, but this amount of moral outrage?
Grandstand
You're
as
not
much
some
as I
hero.
want.
Wow, oh,
I'm
amazing.
the guy that's
Wow.
here debating
Oh,
and
amazing. You're so heroic, man.
And you
You're such
want
a
to
hero.
fuck kids.
No, see, look at this guy, man. Look how perverse. Look at your sick mind, okay?
My sick mind.
How about we talk about
my
your
sick mind.
You want to talk about
the
your
liar
personal
advocating for
You wanna
child
talk about-
marriage and sex is talking about
Look.
my sick mind.
Yeah. What? Is he talking about?
The
Your personal-
liar advocating for
You wanna talk
child
about-
marriage and sex is talking about
Look.
my
Yeah, in his head, he's importing this 2 9-year-olds with adults and kids. So they're talking past each other, I think.
sick mind while
no, look at
inventing
this,
a
man.
fantasy.
Come on,
of
James.
secular
Some moderation
humanism.
here.
Come on. Okay.
Just shouting
I'll
the
shut
F
up.
word is not an argument. Just shouting
Correct.
the F word.
And neither is saying we
Okay.
should let 9-year-olds marry.
Yeah. So we don't need to talk about personal life, okay?
Okay,
You don't
get
need to
back
make any accusations against me.
get
I'll
back to
talk
the
about your
question then.
boyfriend, so don't talk about me. So the thing about
Boyfriend.
this whole argument is that the whole point of this debate on secular humanism is individual happiness the end-all be-all of human morality. Your whole argument has been that we need to do what's best for humanity. The question is, what is actually the best for humanity? Is unhindered pursuit of personal individual happiness going to cause the best for humanity overall? And I'm saying no, because there are other values and institutions that are worth preserving. To be a married person, you have to sacrifice. You cannot
I agree with what Daniel's saying here.
be selfish and only care about your own.
And if you're an atheist and you're like pro Matt, hate Daniel, like just sit back and listen to Daniel, what he's saying here. And ask yourself, do I really disagree with this? See if you can put his terrible ideas about child marriage on the side for a second and listen to exactly what he's saying here.
own desires or your own happiness. You have to look at a couple, a marriage. Same for a family. To preserve a family with parents and children, you have to be concerned about a
See, and this is the problem I see in society. It's like if you disagree with strongly with someone on one specific topic, and then that person says something that you agree with, you don't even allow yourself to agree with them, even though you actually do agree, because of this. You're not dead inside. This emotion in you, this knee-jerk reaction. I have to disagree with everything this person says because this person's evil because they said that one thing. But I bet you that most atheists here who would agree with Matt on many issues, if you were just to take this one little blip in isolation and listen to what Daniel's saying, you'd say, yeah, I agree with Daniel here. Raising families is about self-sacrifice, not always about happiness. And so if your goal is to raise that what guides a society is this idea of happiness, the pleasure machine, as Daniel said, this may not make for the best society.
Same with a community, same for society. There is a conflict between the pursuit of individual happiness and what will make me personally happy versus the needs of these other institutions. I have to sacrifice, and sometimes I have to do things that I don't actually consent to. Yet it is for the greater good of.
Yeah, and the problem is so many people who are, let's say, fans of Matt, even fans of my show here, they're young, not married, don't have kids, and they can't really relate to what Daniel's saying. But if you're older and you're married and you have kids, you basically nod your head and say, yeah, Daniel's right here.
Humanity. That's the main problem with secular humanism, is that it prioritizes individual happiness.
Now, you can disagree with that. Like, that's up for debate, whether secular humanism is actually advocating for individual happiness. I would say no. I would say, well, partly no, partly yes. Some people would say that when you're striving for individual happiness, you're taking into account your societies, because how can you live in a terrible society and you individually be happy? So the premise that Daniel is working on, that secular humanism is all about individual happiness, is not telling the whole story. At least you could say that. Let's see if Matt says that.
So I don't know why you're thinking about my girlfriend during the debate, but she says thanks. Now, back to secular humanism. See, one of us
Oh,
showed
sorry. I
up.
thought you had a boyfriend. I didn't realize.
Keep going.
I didn't realize.
You didn't realize? You're a liar. You're
I
a
didn't
fucking liar. You're a fucking liar, and you want to fuck kids.
I thought you were. Are you gay? You're not.
I'm not.
Well, I don't understand why Matt's so upset. Like, if you're more dead inside, you could just let that go. If you know who you are, you're secure in who you are. Someone can say something that you find deeply offensive, and you just let it go. Don't pause now. Keep it going. Okay, I'll rewind it a bit.
You didn't realize? You're a liar. You're a fucking liar. You're a fucking liar, and you want to fuck kids.
I thought you were. Are you gay or not?
I'm not gay, but if I was gay, I would be happy to say I was gay.
This is a Seinfeld episode. I'm not gay. But even if I was gay, there's nothing wrong with that. It's like I'm back in the 90s.
Okay.
Anybody here think I would have a problem saying if I was gay?
He's
if I was
accusing
gay?
me of committing.
No, because it doesn't
That's
matter.
appropriate, James.
This is one of the things that
If you're gonna let him hurl the F word at me,
I can hurl the F word at whoever the fuck I want, fucker.
look at.
Sorry, this is just comedy gold to me. I feel like Hitchens right now. I am enjoying the sufferings of others, and Matt is suffering. Like, look at the two faces here. Who's taking more offense? Who's more fragile in this conversation? Is it Daniel, or is it Matt? I say it's Matt. Now, Daniel's saying, hey, look, he's hurling F words at me. He's accusing me of effing kids. But Daniel's saying Arden is his boyfriend. That's set Matt off.
This. He's not personal, but
It's not a magic word.
He was going to respond to you, Daniel.
No, he's saying
The F word's not a magic word. What about the N word? Would Matt feel okay saying that?
highly offensive things to me right now.
You just referred to my girlfriend as my boyfriend, but I'm the one hurling highly offensive things. You know what? We're
I'm
not
just
offended.
learning something right now.
You're a liar. Let's just get back to this. So one of us showed up today to debate 3 topics, and I'm the only one that addressed the first one. The second one, don't care that much about because what's compelling doesn't have any impact on what's true. But the third one's important because is the world better under secular humanism or under Islam? And did I present a hedonistic view of secular humanism that is just about? No.
Yeah, James Dean, I agree with you. Like, on these type of debates, for, let's say, people in the middle, fence sitters, the calmer person wins. Here's another good reason to be a little more dead inside. If you're in a debate situation and you're more dead inside, you're going to be viewed as the winner.
That's the straw man that Daniel constructed in his science fiction Star Trek fantasy of what's going to actually happen if we do this. It's his metaphor for what secular humanism has done to the world. Not because there's anything demonstrably wrong about it, but because he disagrees with it. And in particular, his particular view of Islam disagrees with it. He hasn't given you no reason why secular humanism is a problem. And under secular humanism, he can practice his version of Islam.
No, he did give a reason, because he views secular humanism as putting one's individual self and happiness before others, and that there's no self-sacrifice. Now, I disagree with it because I think the two can be tied together. But that's his reason.
He just can't marry a fucking 9-year-old.
Yeah, that's all you got. All you have is the F word. And
Yeah, I agree with Daniel here. So far on this issue, in the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that's all Matt has to say.
this personal attacks.
Ignore the whole argument.
So this is interruption that we're talking about.
I'm still talking.
Look, we're not
Ignore
talking
the
about your
argument and focus on
homosexuality
the
or
F
whatever.
word is the
We're not
dishonest
talking
liar's
about
way of
homosexuality
avoiding
here.
Like, so far, Matt has not said what I would have said in the same situation, that you can actually tie in individual happiness with society's happiness. And so this pleasure machine is not a hedonistic type pleasure, but a pleasure that is for the most well-being for yourself and society, and everybody wins. So far, I haven't heard Matt say this. Now, I have not listened to this whole live stream. So maybe he did say this somewhere else. And if he did, good for Matt. But so far, it's just, you just want to F kids.
Bonding.
We're not talking about homosexuality here. Let me get back to the debate.
We were.
So, a thought experiment. You're not familiar with a thought experiment, but it's where you go through an
I'm not
idea
familiar with a thought
and work out
experiment.
work out the implication. Yeah, you're not familiar with a lot of things apparently. So
I've only taught about thought experiments many
come on,
times, but
James.
I'm not
Some
familiar.
moderation. I let him talk.
If he's
I'm
just
going
going
to
to
interrupt
accuse me of
everything he
lying,
says
if
from
he's
now
just
on.
going to lie
I'm
and say
going
I
to
don't know
interrupt
stuff I
everything
know.
he says from now
That's
on.
good, and I'll interrupt
I'm going to
everything you say
everything
from
he
now on,
says.
and we can just sit here the whole time, because as long as you're
We can
going to
do that.
lie,
We can do
I'm going to
that.
call you out for
We
your
can do
lies,
that.
you lying
So-
liar.
I don't know why I find this so funny. But you lying liar. A real man, I'm going to say this just to trigger Matt and some of his followers. A real man can hear things that are false about him, take it in, and not be impacted. Hey, Matt, think about like you'll have your time, Matt, to clear things up. But this might help Matt. Matt, view yourself like Satan. You know, in the Bible, God says horrible things about Satan. Satan's the author of lies. He's the great deceiver. He tempts people. Blah, blah, blah. Satan's bad, bad, bad. Guess what Satan does? Nothing. Satan is the bigger man than Yahweh. Satan didn't need to write a book. Satan just sat back and bring it on. Give me your worst. I know who I am. I'm a stable guy. Be more like Satan, Matt. Just let Daniel hurl these lies at you and just say, I know the truth. You can't bother me. You can't rile me up. But Daniel knows he can rile Matt up. It is incredibly easy to manipulate Matt Dillahunty. It is extremely easy to manipulate Matt Dillahunty because he's an emotional guy. Don't let people manipulate you, Matt. Be more dead inside. People get upset with me when I say that because they themselves struggle with being less emotional, and they feel they can't even do it and take exercise to become better at it, and so they will just immediately push back.
Let's go to a new topic from either
Cool.
of your openings.
Sweet.
Yeah, so let's focus on the violent history of liberalism. Let's look at the reign of terror. Let's look at the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan, the spread of democracy and human rights. Oh, that has nothing to do with secularism. It was people like you and Christopher Hitchens, for example, or Sam Harris that said, we need to bring democracy to Iraq, democracy to Afghanistan. They don't have women's rights.
Did Sam Harris and Hitchens say bring democracy to Iraq? No, I think in Hitchens' case, it was that they had violated certain laws that the European Union and United States had put together. What's it called? And that's why they needed to be invaded. In fact, Hitchens made the argument that even if there were 0 weapons of mass destruction, the invasion of Iraq was justified. I remember Hitchens saying that. I think it's on video.
Bomb them, and even if we have to nuke Mecca, I believe that's what Sam Harris said, that's the price we're willing to pay for the spread of liberal human rights. Those people all claim to be humanists. They all claim to be fighting for the benefit of humanity. They all claim to be fighting for liberation and equality and consent and women's rights and gay rights and transgender rights. All of these things that claim to be part of your value system, they were also advocating. But you conveniently, like all of these atheists, want to wipe your hands of that. That's a complete cop-out response. The values that you uphold are a part of the values that were spread throughout the world by force, brutal, violent force. And I mentioned many historical examples up until today. It's still happening.
I tend to agree with Daniel here. Like, it's a tough one though, because when do countries intervene against other countries doing atrocities to their own people? But in general, like, I was raised Mennonite. I was raised pacifistic leaning. In general, you want to avoid war at all costs. I mean, who here likes war, but unless you make tanks for a living, which is a lot of people. But when do you step in and saying, this is terrible, we got to stop this? Do we let countries fight each other? As the United States as a superpower, do we just sit back and let countries go at each other's throats, kill each other? Like it or not, the United States is the most powerful military in the world, and they have the power to be like daddy and separate kids that are fighting. Now, should daddy just let the kids fight and destroy each other? Or should daddy intervene? These are tough questions.
It's still happening with an international human rights law, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's all based on secular humanism, but you don't want to take ownership of that.
Yeah, and I disagree with Daniel here. George W. Bush referred to prayer before he invaded Iraq. He talked about Gog and Magog in the Old Testament as representatives of Iraq or even Russia, North Korea, China, I don't know. But no, like, this was not secular humanism.
That law is imposed. If you violate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and international law, the UN will place sanctions on you. You have a Security Council that will punish you as a nation and starve you to death because you do not uphold those specific values. The analogy or metaphor with the pleasure machine is exactly correct. This is exactly what happens. They will bomb you, starve your children to death, and say, look, we're just trying to liberate you. We just want the best for humanity.
Yeah, see, but Daniel, I would encourage you, if you ever listen to this, to encourage personal responsibility on an individual level and also on a national level. If sanctions can totally cripple you to the point where your own people starve to death, I mean, your country's already made a mistake that you put yourself in that situation. Like, I remember when the Ukraine war started and the sanctions against Russia started, and me saying, you think these sanctions are going to scare Russia, do anything to Russia? I mean, they will survive. They won't starve to death. They produce enough food on their own. They can be self-reliant. But, of course, it never goes to that extreme. They have allies.
That's why we have these laws. We are creating an international order of rules, and it's a rules-based order, so obey or you will die. That's the history of secular humanism. You don't want to acknowledge that history.
Well, because it's a lie, and here's why. First of all, I'm not Sam Harris, and I disagree with Sam on a number of things. I'm also not Christopher Hitchens, and I think he was monumentally wrong about war. And while I served in the military for 8 years, I have massive objections to what our Christian-led country did to try to put democracy everywhere. They fucked the world up, and what they did was they helped create more people who hate this country and more people who are now compelled to become jihadis than to become secularists, because the United States is not secular humanism in action. And in just the same way that he represented the United States Revolution as if it was the principle of secular humanism didn't exist until 1963 with the first Humanist Manifesto. You don't get to saddle everything that isn't Islam under secular humanism. And as secular humanists are here in the United States, fighting for equality and freedom that allows you to be a Muslim and Mike to be a Christian and me to be an atheist. It wasn't secular humanism that sent people out and tried to conquer Iraq. And it wasn't me, so don't fucking saddle me with your delusion of what you think I believe. Let's address what I actually think and say, like I've done with you.
I agree. I think that was well said by Matt.
Yeah, very convenient. You can mention 9/11. You can mention all kinds of terrorist attacks to attack my position and attack Islam. Islam condemns terrorism. It attacks killing civilians for the purposes of war. So you can saddle me with that, no problem. You can just have a cute little hashtag.
I didn't.
Boomer joke about it. But when I
Boomer, I'm a
point out all of these, well, you don't age well, my friend.
Oh.
But when I talk about all of the tens of millions
Classy to the
killed,
end.
tens of millions that are killed by your ideology, secular humanism
Not killed
is
by
a
my ideology. No,
secular
nobody's been killed by my
secular
ideology.
humanism, secular
Nobody's
humanism,
been killed by
secular
my
humanism.
ideology. Nobody's been killed by my.
Yeah, deny it.
Say
Okay,
it.
we heard it. We heard
Has
it.
anybody been killed
Yes,
because of my? You're
tens
a
of
liar.
millions. Okay, fine.
You are a liar.
Tens of millions. Your hands are bloody with the
My
blood
hands
of
are not
millions.
bloody. And
Yes,
they're
they
also
are.
not
You literally went to
groping
war.
children.
Like you're the last person. Come on, man. Look at this. Yeah, look at this.
I'm sorry you have to live up to your
And he
words.
whines about being classy. Look at that. I call him a boomer.
It is classy. Is defending kids classy? I think so.
Chill, man. Chill.
What's that?
You have no real argument. You have no real
I
argument.
have no real argument.
Other
the guy
than
who presented
that's
no
not the
real
debate.
argument
Oh,
all
you
night is saying
F
I
this
don't
and
have
you
a real
F
argument.
that. You want to F that.
All I've done
That's
is
all your
curse.
argumentation is about.
All I've
based
done
on.
is curse, James. It's amazing.
All you've done is, oh, that's not the debate topic. Oh, where's the scientific evidence?
Sorry,
Oh,
you didn't
want
stay
to
on the debate
You
topic.
want to F kids, sir. That's your whole debate.
Not my fault. You're a grown up. You can say fuck. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so secular humanism is a variant of liberalism. All of the values that you claim.
I want to see PineCreek debate Daniel. What? I don't do formal debates like this, but although this is not so formal as you can see, this is just them going at it back and forth. But yeah, I have no problem talking to Daniel. I have no problem talking to Matt. So far, there's things that both of them have said I agree with greatly. There's things that they both said I disagree with.
As a secular humanist that you cited in your opening statement were also the values that were cited as the justification for the invasion of Iraq, sanctions of many Muslim countries around the world, the invasion of Afghanistan. Those secular values were cited as the justification. That's why they call it Operation Iraqi Freedom. That's not a coincidence. Now, you want to wash your hands of that very conveniently. That's fine. I'm not saying you personally supported those wars. My argument is that your ideology was the basis as a justification for those wars and that invasion. I'll ask you a very simple question.
I can sort of see what Daniel's saying here, Operation Freedom, but I think the main justification for going into Iraq was weapons of mass destruction, and then was the atrocities Saddam had to his own people and some other things. So it wasn't just one thing. And it wasn't, I think, primarily to set up a democracy in Iraq. Now, you can say that even though it wasn't the main justification, that was the hope or the goal that wasn't clearly stated.
Do you believe in international law based on secular humanism? Not the manifesto that no one knows about and no one has read, but the secular humanism, the idea of separation of church and state, individual happiness, equality, etc. Those values that I focused on in my opening, do you think that should be the basis of international law? And should there be consequences for violating international law?
Didn't I make a very express thing in my opening about the separation of church and state and how I would be fine, and I'm a secular humanist, and I would be fine with a secular state, but not a secular humanist state. Didn't I make that clear? Yeah. I thought so.
Yeah, so secular. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly why I'm attacking.
So you're equating secular with secular humanism. And so anything that's secular is bad, right?
No, I said that secular humanism is a sub-ideology of liberalism. The values in liberalism include value for freedom, value for equality, maximizing freedom and equality. No, I say that should be balanced by other concerns like marriage, family, community.
I don't know that marriage.
Oh, they're starting to agree on something.
Marriage and community are necessarily the parts, but I'm not opposed to either one of them.
But that's the conflict. Sometimes marriage.
But if you're gonna, we both want freedom, and you can't just cite, well, freedom is the problem.
That's not what I said. Freedom. I said freedom is a value. Freedom is a value, but it should not be the only value that we maximize.
Say it was.
Okay, so what other value?
Straw man me.
So what other value? So for example, in marriage, you have certain obligations. You have, when you sign a marriage contract, traditionally, that requires giving up certain rights, giving up certain duties. If a person just wants to opt out of that because they're just not happy with a marriage anymore, should they be able to do that?
Should divorce be allowed? Yes, I'm in favor of divorce. I'm actually divorced.
No fault divorce.
Well, no fault divorce gets more into politics and financing. But I don't know necessarily which version of divorce is better. But since I'm still really good friends with my ex-wife, I should probably message her and see if she's okay with the way we got divorced. We don't seem to have a problem with it.
Or for example, like within marriage, you're not allowed to sleep with whoever you want, right?
My wife was allowed to sleep with whoever she wanted while we were together.
But is that good? Is that a good thing?
Yeah.
Did that help preserve
Maybe that's why they're divorced now.
your marriage?
Yeah.
For most people, it doesn't, because when a spouse cheats,
I wouldn't think
for
so.
most people,
Because I don't know. I think most people are not naturally monogamous. I mean, sorry, most people are not naturally polyamorous. They are monogamous. Now, guys will fantasize and they'll look lustfully on other women, but I think most men prefer to have one wife throughout their life.
Not cheating.
yes, okay, call it whatever you want, but when
No,
a
it's not
spouse is
cheating.
involved with other people, that will biologically reduce the attraction that the male feels for his spouse.
And
that is part of the reason why marriage customs throughout the world involve fidelity.
Yeah.
You have to be faithful to your spouse. That's part of being in a marriage. So if you want to preserve marriage, you have to restrict someone's freedom to sleep with whoever they want. If you say, no, freedom is most important, they should be able to sleep with whoever they want, that undermines the institution of marriage. Why? Because there's this biological attachment that's destroyed when your spouse sleeps with other people.
Yeah. So this notion that I have no problem with marriage. I have no problem with people being in monogamous, committed relationships. I'm in one now, and I've been in one before. But the notion that your marriage is right for everybody else is problematic. There are plenty of people who have marriages that are different. There are sometimes two men who get married and it works out. Two women get married and it works out. Evidently, there's some polygamists that do it and it works out. I don't get it because it's not me.
I don't get it
It's
either.
not anything that I want to participate in.
Well,
But-
the whole premise was, do you
but-
value marriage? Not you're okay
but-
with marriage. Because if you value something, then what kind of policies would you put in place to preserve that institution?
I
Good
don't. I
question.
think that an institution that has to be preserved through policy probably isn't nearly as valuable as you think it is.
Okay, then what about the policies for scientific education? Like, what if there are countries that are like, we don't need any scientific education? There's
Boy, Daniel should have stuck on marriage a little bit longer. I would have loved to have explored that, because most societies have some type of family unit that helps communities grow and thrive. And wouldn't you want a government to protect that, Matt, or no? It sounds like he kind of said no, because it should be able to protect itself. I think that's what he's saying. I don't know. I honestly don't know my stance on this either, like how much government should be involved in marriage. Like, definitely there's tax incentives, but to me that's like a side issue. Like, if the United States made divorce illegal unless under extreme circumstances, would that, and then you fast forward 100 years, would society be better or worse? What do you think? So let's say you made a law in the United States said you can only get divorced if your spouse beats you. Let's say just that for now. And whether you're happy with each other, who cares? You don't have to be happy with your spouse. But you have to stay married. Unless your spouse beats you physically. Verbally, say even verbally is okay. You gotta be tougher, you gotta get stronger. And let's say that especially divorce is not allowed if you have kids. And then you fast forward 100 years. Would society be worse or better? I don't know the answer to that question. One can make arguments on both sides, saying, well, it's actually worse for the kids if the parents don't get along. But I do think that if parents did not have the option to get divorced, rational human beings would make the best of their situation. And when they would make the best of their situation, they would be together, and that's better for the kids. That's my intuition.
religious education. And actually, we're not going to educate most of the population. Would you have a problem with that? Should
Yeah.
there be a policy in place that, no, every country has to implement this type of educational model?
I don't think I get to decide what model another country does, but I can certainly speak out about how they may be harming or depriving their citizens of a robust education by denying it. I would prefer that they permit it and then allow freedom. That's the thing. That's the thing with freedom. If you want to say, oh, we should deny this type of education because we want to preserve this particular society, that's a problem. That's the problem that you built your entire metaphor around, is there are freedoms that you don't want to allow because you're terrified of what will happen in the world if you allow them. You don't get to decide for the world.
Yeah, but Matt's the same way. There's freedoms he doesn't want to allow either.
And that's why
I think Daniel brought up education. Like, should kids be free not to go to school?
secular humanism is better than your version of Islam. Because
you get to,
under mine, you get to keep thinking this and living the life that you and whoever you convince to actually be with you want to live within reason until they come in conflict. And then somebody's got to step in.
So is there any obligation for children to go to school?
I am a fan of providing required public education.
So it's required. So you're a fan of
Yes.
imposing without a child's consent that they be placed into schooling.
I'm a
So where
I'm
they
an
learn
education rapist.
where they learn. Yeah. So you don't believe in consent. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
So-
laugh it up, you.
So here's
300-pound gorilla
Here's the
back
thing
there.
that Daniel doesn't seem to understand.
So yeah.
Here's the thing that
Whenever
Daniel
you get
doesn't-
caught
here's the
on
thing that Daniel doesn't
inconsistency,
seem
you
to
make a joke or
Here's-
you blast the F word. Whenever you're caught out on an
I'm not caught in
inconsistency,
inconsistency.
you just
If you
blurt
let
out
me
the
finish.
F word. You
Every
make a
time-
joke.
See, they're both kind of right here. It's a bit of a cheap shot by Daniel, but Daniel's point is there are cases where you restrict freedoms for kids. You do what's best for the kid, even if the kid doesn't want it, and you don't care about the kid's consent. Do you consent to go to school? No, Daddy, I do not consent to go to school. Too bad, you're going to school. Now, why do parents say that? Because for the greater good, right? So, of course, there's exceptions.
For your plant to laugh
Every
at.
time
like
I have a
clown back there.
good point that he knows
Whenever
is coming,
you don't have
he
an
tries
answer,
to talk over me.
Whenever you don't have an answer, you have to make a
I
dumb
have an
joke,
answer.
a
If you
boomer
shut
joke.
the fuck up, I tell you.
Oh, big man, come and say that right here.
Can I say it right where? Here. Relax. I don't do anything. I'm not violent.
Go ahead. Do it.
I'm saying I have an answer.
James is a big guy. But, I mean, I don't understand this. Like, what's Matt trying to prove? That he's not scared? Like, Daniel is putting strings on Matt and making Matt do whatever he wants here. Come over here and say that. Okay, I will. This is so childish. And to think, I mean, James stepped in, but Matt would never do anything. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I get the impression if it ever came to blows, Daniel would knock Matt out very quickly.
Okay, I'll sit down. You said
Sit down.
to come over there and say it. I'm
Yeah.
not violent. I would never do
You
anything.
can't
violent.
respond to any point. You just make a joke.
I can't respond to any
So
point
you
'cause
do
you won't
believe
shut the
in
fuck up.
schooling rape.
So,
you believe in.
Do you want an answer? Or do you
educational
want to
rape? rape?
keep pretending that I don't
You're
have it?
you're
Do you want
believing
an
in
answer? You don't
educational
want an
rape.
answer.
Okay.
You don't want an answer.
I
is the
bet
truth.
your boyfriend finds you
He
really
doesn't want an
attractive.
answer. He doesn't want an answer. He'd rather pretend I don't have
You
one.
believe you're a fan of educational rape.
Do you want an answer, or are you going to keep pretending I don't have one? Because I fucking got one.
You said it. You made a joke, but that's the.
See, if I was Matt, I would just say, yes, I'm a fan of the educational rape because it's for the greater good. But that's my style. My style is to give my opponent what they want. A nice little sound clip. You want a nice little sound clip? Here it is. I'm against coitus rape, but I'm for educational rape. There's your clip.
You're a fan of forcing children without consent to go into schools where they will be subjected to a scientific worldview that will affect their entire lives at the deepest level. You have no
Yes,
problem
true.
with the lack of consent in that situation.
How terrified he is of my answer. And he wants to prop up his straw man again about what I'm actually saying.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that Dan doesn't understand about consent and about parenthood. Parents don't own their children. You don't. You are the caretakers of those children. You are instilled with a responsibility.
Okay. I kind of agree with Matt here, but I'm going to push back anyhow. On what basis does Matt say that parents don't own their children? What if someone to say yes, let's say I were to say yes, I do own my children. On what basis could he argue against that? In fact, if there's anybody on the planet who owns their children, it's a guy like me. You know why? I literally bought and paid for my kids. Literally paid $50,000 each through in vitro fertilization and C-sections and all the fertility treatments before that. I have invoices. I even considered, because my wife and I had problems having kids, considered getting life insurance on my kids when they were born. Because if they died, I'd have to spend another $50,000 or so to get a replacement. So if I was to say to Matt, I disagree. I own my children. They're my property. On what basis other than feelings could Matt argue against me? On what basis other than intuitions could Matt argue against? Is there some universal law that says parents don't own their children? Or is it just because it sounds icky to you? Like, seriously, how would you argue against that? For a parent to say, I own my kids. I'd be curious to know.
To raise responsible members of society and to teach them the minimal things that they will need to carry on a productive life when you're not around. One of the ways that we do that is through a tax-supported public school system, because parents are not equipped to work multiple jobs and teach their kids quite often. Some of them aren't qualified to teach their kids at all.
Yeah. Oh, I could say a ton about this. I could say a ton about this issue. I agree with Matt. Many parents are not equipped to teach their own kids. Many parents have to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. There once was a time when one parent could sustain a family unit and the other parent stay home and take care of the kids. But this gets to issues of personal responsibility and that humans can actually choose to get pregnant or not. Parents could actually look at the future and say, do I want to bring a child into this environment, in this dangerous environment where they have no choices? Or do I want to refrain and not get pregnant? Humans have agency. They can actually think about these things. Whereas I think people like Matt might say, no, humans are going to do what humans are going to do. They want to pound that. I mean, they want to have coitus. They want to have sex, and it's just inevitable. People are going to have kids. But if you're a planner and you're responsible and you have kids that you can afford, guess what? You don't need public education. You don't need public education. Now, public education could still exist as a way for economies of scale. Not even private schools have a nice big chemistry lab to do experiments. Yeah, fine. But if, let's say, only millionaires reproduced in the United States, do you think we'd need public schools? No. But that would never happen.
So we come up with a standardized curriculum that we put in public schools, which represents, in some cases, at least the bare minimum of reading, writing, arithmetic, things like civics and stuff like that, because those are the things that kids are going to need to know when they come to be responsible adults, when it's time for them to vote, when it's time for them to decide if they're going to join the military, when it's time for them to...
This is, I think Matt's expressing concerns of why public schools are needed, because we can't trust parents, we can't trust even private schools to educate, because they might not educate the way we want. There's this assumption that if it's private schools only, then evolution would never be taught. I disagree with that. I'd say even in religious schools, you'll still have evolution being taught. It might be alongside intelligent design, but so what? Doesn't bother me one bit. My daughter went to Christian school for 2 to 3 years, 2 to 3 days per week for 2 to 3 years. She loved it. My daughter's basically an atheist. She doesn't use the word, but she doesn't believe. She highly doubts God exists. She's open to it. She's not a Christian, not a Muslim, not a Jew, not anything. She absolutely loved going to private Christian schools. You know why? Because they're not as crazy and dangerous as the public schools. They actually had more values. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still some crazy kids in private Christian schools too. But most of them came from stable, two-parent homes, family values. She'd rather go to a private, as an atheist, go to a private Christian school than a public school. And I had no problem with that. I encouraged it.
Choose for themselves as an act of freedom what religion, if any, they wish to follow. That is why I'm not only a fan of public education, I'm not only a fan of compelled public education, I think that raising the next generation of kids to understand how the world around them works so that they can function well within it is a moral duty.
Yes, I agree, Matt, but it doesn't have to be through public schools. Can I get an amen? I mean, so many people who talk about these issues don't even have kids of their own. Like, my son goes to a public school right now. I pay $5,000 a year in property taxes, roughly. So I'm paying for it. So we're using it. But I look at his tests. He showed me one of his assignments. It's a burden I have because I think I'm a natural teacher. My wife's a teacher. We look at how questions are worded, how tests are worded, and this teacher's an idiot. Some of these teachers are not good teachers. People always say public school teachers should be paid more. No, only the good ones should be paid more. There's so many bad teachers in the public school education system. I'd say more so in the private. Because in the private system, there's direct accountability. People are paying $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year for their kid to go to school. And if a teacher is not making the tests correctly, parents tell the principal, they tell the board, and things are done. With teacher unions, If you're a parent and you have the means, don't send your kids to public school in general. No. And here I am having a kid going to public school. I mean, was it last year? I seriously said, we got to get you out of here. But he said, no, I got my friends, I got my musical theater, but there's musical theater we could find you. Like, no, if I had my way, he'd be going to private school.
There's your answer.
Yeah, so you're a fan of educational rape. Basically, you believe that you should compel children to go into these school systems where they're taught your atheistic standards of scientific evidence, the only things that are true that can be scientifically proven. That is justifying atheism. You're indoctrinating children with atheism within those school systems because you're teaching a scientific worldview. There is no choice that parents should have in that. There's no choice on the part of parents. That system is imposed.
What do you call those, vouchers? I would love to ask Matt that. Like, are you for or against parents choosing where their kids use their tax dollars, where their kids go to school? Are you for that freedom? And by the way, I think the vast majority of African Americans in the United States want this type of choice, this voucher system, where they can take their kids out of the public school that they're currently in, and they feel that their kids are failing, the education system is failing them, and move them to a better charter school. And then basically starve that bad public school to death. And basically, failing schools die, good schools survive. I wonder if Matt's for that type of capitalism, that type of competition. I think he would say no, because there's some kids who will suffer because of it.
You have no choice as a parent. In certain countries, in the US, we still have homeschooling options, but they're fighting liberal, secular humanists are fighting to actually destroy that option. You go to a country like Germany, you go to a country like Sweden, bastions of secular humanism. They also have banned homeschooling. You have to put your children into these secular schools where atheism is the...
Yeah, Daniel, I hope you asked Matt. I haven't watched this far. I hope you asked Matt if he would be for the banning of homeschooling. I'd be very curious to know what Matt would say. But I'd be totally against this. In fact, I'm going to start the mantra, I own my kids. Well, one of my children is 20. But yeah, as an owner of since kids are my property, I should have the right, the freedom to educate them as I see fit. And that includes homeschooling. We should start that movement. We own our kids. They are our property, not the government's. Not anyone's property, but the parents.
Ground assumption. Not Islam, not Christianity, not Buddhism, not Hinduism, atheism. So this is non-consensual. It is quite violent, because if you don't send your children to school, the police will come and bust down your door and take your children by force. And this is what has been happening to Christians and Muslims in Sweden. It's quite a heart-wrenching sight to see the police bust down the door of Muslims and take children in the name of secular humanism. You are not putting your children in schools, therefore we are going to take your children away. This is the reality of secular humanism. Yeah, go ahead and wipe your hands. Oh, that's not literally me. But you said you're a fan of compelled education. So you're a fan of these types of policies.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
This might be an opportunity.
Whoa. Did Matt just say he's a fan of the policy of taking children away from their parents who will not put them in public education? I would disagree with Matt there. See, I would say let's say parents don't want to put their kids in public education. They homeschool. And let's say as those kids get older, they are less productive to society and even a burden to society, and their lives are not as good. They're on welfare, whatever. I have a little more faith in humanity than Matt does, because I would say parents might actually start thinking, our neighbors, their kids went to public school. Now they're doctors, lawyers, they're successful. Maybe we made a mistake there. And then they tell their kids, don't make the same mistake we did. Send your kids to public school. Now, if that's true, you would think people would learn. I actually think are like Pavlov's dog. They're like rats in a cage. They press the button and they get a pebble. Humans are not that much different. We learn. We adapt. We realize, oops, made a mistake here. Ooh, oh, wow, I did something right. Let's repeat that. And the thing that what government does, that when they actually fix or make amends to mistakes humans make, they don't learn that lesson. This is why I lean more right than left. That I actually think suffering a little bit is a good thing. I'm not saying people should starve on the streets, but I'm saying that people learn from their mistakes through these types of sufferings. It's evolutionary. I don't need God or religion to explain that. If you're stupid, you're more likely to die. If you don't look both ways before you cross the street, you're more likely to die. If you are smarter and you think ahead, oh, maybe I should look both ways, you're more likely to survive.
Do we need to go into the Q&A?
Let's do it, because I'm ready to go home.
You got it. Folks, if you want to come up on...
Q&A. I have not watched this. I have no idea. I'm not going to guess if any of it's going to be good. Does anybody want to come in and disagree with me? Let me know. But I did want to give kudos to David Pacman here, bringing Dennis Prager on. It was a great conversation. I think I want to show this to show the contrast between Daniel and Matt, and now listen to David Pacman, who I think is an atheist, and Prager, who's a Jew. Listen how different this is, this interaction.
Program. He had a conversation not too long ago with our friend Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks. Dennis, welcome. It's great to speak to you today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Just to start, and this can be so quick and then we move on, just as a sort of sanity check, I've started to ask guests in this year, last year, the following question. Is there any way to accurately say that Donald Trump won the 2020 election? Just a simple answer if there is one, and if not, it's fine for you to explain further.
So
I like the way David set up this question.
I have a relatively simple answer, and I've given it from the election day to this day.
Yes, sir.
I am agnostic, which has satisfied neither the left nor the right.
Okay.
My colleagues on the right want me to say it was stolen, and people on the left want me to say we are certain it wasn't stolen.
Well, and half of the right also wants you to say that, right?
Half of the right wants me to, I wouldn't say half. I would say most people on the right believe it was stolen, or that there was a good chance it was.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not agnostic. I think Biden won. However, that being said, I love that phrase, that being said, if I was God and had omniscience, I could turn off and on. Let me say this. It would not shock me. It would not surprise me one bit if I turned on my omniscience switch and I could know the truth of every single vote to find out, oh, yeah, Trump would have eked out a victory. Would not shock me to learn that. And the reasons why I say that is, I think, coming up here, they talk about it.
I don't know what that gains us, but it's fair that you ask. See, it's funny. You regard that as a sanity check.
I do.
So, okay, so let me offer my sanity check.
Please.
Do you believe that men who say they're women can compete with women in women's sports?
I think in a lot of sports that does not make sense.
Oh, I love this. I love both these guys. Question, answer. Question, answer. To the point, civil, no emotion. I wonder if it's because they're both Jews. I don't. Then they have a history of suffering, so much suffering in their past that they've built up this immunity to this emotional wreckness that you see Matt Delante have. I mean, and one guy leans far right, one guy leans far left. This is beautiful. This is how conversations should take place. And this is not even street epistemology. This is just regular two guys just talking.
So how do you...
Was that the answer you expected? Because you did a little bit of a look to the side there. But did you think I was going to...
No, I didn't look to the side because I took off my earphones.
Understood, sir.
I realized that I don't need them.
Okay. But this is a different topic, Dennis.
I'm sorry?
It's a different topic. Do we want to close on the election first?
Oh, well, you said you just wanted to ask that question for a sanity check.
Okay, and you're agnostic is the answer.
Yeah. So I am agnostic because so many things happened that were odd or unique.
Okay, listen.
Like it was the first time that a president had ever, an incumbent president had ever gotten more votes than he did in his first election and lost.
Fact.
That all the swing states went in his favor. That 17 of the 18 counties that are considered bellwether counties went in his favor. Those who think something bad happened are not out of their minds.
Yeah. I made this same comment, when the election happened. In order for you to say that Biden won, you have to admit a once-in-a-lifetime, American lifetime event, where a sitting president got more votes the second time than the first time and still lost. Now, you can acknowledge that happened and still say, yeah, but Biden still won because of COVID and because of the mail-in balloting, all great counterpoints to it. But you still got to... This is a 3 sigma event. This is a statistical anomaly that happened. That's never happened before.
Okay. I mean, we don't have to make this the subject of the conversation, but things sometimes happen for the first time.
Yeah.
I guess the question I would
That's
ask
a good argument.
as a follow-up would be...
There's always a first time for everything. And Biden was the first time. And, you know, looking back in hindsight, here's another great argument. Biden is not special. There's nothing great about Biden. Even people who voted for him would admit that. Biden is not like Ronald Reagan, where he got a ton of support from both sides. Reagan even was loved by women, and for Republicans to be voted by single women takes something. Biden is none of that. So the argument you would have to make is Biden basically was the anti-Trump vote. Biden was not even on the ticket. It was Trump or not Trump. That was your two choices.
Did you see compelling evidence from any one state that suggests that Joe Biden lost it even though he was given the win? Is there a single state where you feel confident it was stolen?
Georgia might be one of them. Pennsylvania might be one. And of course, people say, because I love to have people I differ with on my show. And so I read the left. I only wish the left read the right as much as I read the left.
Well, I try to, but what evidence
you
was
probably
there in
do.
Georgia?
You probably do. I think if you do, you're atypical. But in any event,
I think they're both atypical.
What's the Georgia
I'm
evidence?
told all the time that courts dismissed all these cases. That's true. But that's the tragedy. See, if I were an America-loving Democrat, and there are 11 America-loving Democrats, and there are America-hating Democrats. There are both. But there are America-loving Democrats. If I were one, I would say, please, let us air all of these complaints.
Yep.
Let us have some type, as close as we can, to some neutral authority. Not rule on it. Just allow the American public to hear what evidence there might be. And I'll add another thing. If one believes, and I'd love you to respond to this.
Yeah.
If one believes that Donald Trump is a neo-Nazi fascist.
Something I've never said, but we could maybe find someone who
okay.
believes that. Yeah.
Well, okay. I believe you haven't said it, but it's not germane to my argument. Whether you said it or not, it's said often that he is a fascist. Excuse me. That he is a fascist is constantly said on the left, and so if you believe that, aren't you morally bound to cheat on his behalf? For example.
Yeah. Sam Harris made the same point. I believe it was Sam Harris who said, if you truly believe that a guy like Donald Trump is terrible for America and terrible for the world, I mean, he's going to be, if you vote for him, he's never going to leave office. And it's going to kill millions of people, maybe start nuclear war. If you truly believe this, wouldn't cheating be the moral thing to do? Think about it. Now, I think there's cheating on both sides, but I'm biased to think that there's more cheating on the left than the right. Now, why do I say that? Do I just say that because of my bias, or do I have some evidence behind it? My evidence behind it is that people who vote Democrat tend to be, the distribution is like, let's say this is income level. I've got to do it for you guys. Left to right? No, that's right to left, right? $0, $1 million over here. $0 million over here. People who vote Democrat tend to be below $50,000 a year, so a distribution curve there. And then the very academic professionals, whatever, a distribution curve on the ends. People who vote Republican tend to be more in the middle. So if you have this idea that Trump is going to actually cause so much badness and you're poor, you can be bought and paid for. You have incentive, both emotionally and financially, to cheat. And I would say it's a little less so for Republicans. That's my evidence. Now, people are going to push back hard against that. Sure, there's poor Republicans who could cheat as well. But I'm saying there's a scotch more on the Democrat side to cheat, more incentive. So that's why I would say that any fraud that takes place happens on both sides, but it's probably more on the Democrat side because of the wealth disparity. Oh, that's going to really peeve off people, won't it? But my logic is sound, right? It makes sense. What I said is reasonable. And you can look at polling about the income levels. It's about right.
We were in Germany in 1932 during the elections that brought Hitler to power. I tell you, I would have cheated. on behalf of any other party than Hitler's party.
Yeah.
Aren't you morally bound to cheat if you believe the man is a fascist?
You'd have to ask someone who believes that. I don't know. I mean, I think, listen, we only have a half hour and we're 5 minutes in.
Yeah, so look, well, let's talk
I
about
think what I would say is the audience can judge, is there evidence out of Georgia that's convincing to them? Is your answer to, did Trump win, logical into them in any way? Let's let the audience decide on this section of the conversation. Fair. I'm really interested in talking to you about woke, anti-woke, cultural issues, etc. Now, you and I...
Yeah, on the high side, yeah, there's a lot of Republicans that make over 100,000.
I could pick one thing, like cat litter boxes in bathrooms or, quote, men and women's sports or drag shows or whatever, and we could just talk about that for 25 minutes. But I want to zoom out a little bit because you've been in this for a while, and I've been following many of the things you've said about these issues. Here's my curiosity. If you look at polling, if you're going to just reject polling, then we'll talk about that. But let's assume that we have some polling that tells us something that is relatively close to what the country believes. Record support for same-sex marriage today. Record number of people saying, I'm moving away from religion. Highest in the Roe v. Wade era of the country says abortion should be legal in most cases. 60% says we haven't gone far enough on making trans people feel welcome. Okay, I could go on, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. Do you feel as though this is a lost cause and the country has clearly gone in a different direction from where you would like to see it? Or what do you think might happen that would turn around this 30, 40-year trend of moving to the left culturally that I believe we are seeing in the polls?
I think Prager would agree with gay marriage. Oh, does he? I don't know. We'll see.
No question we're moving to the left culturally. The first thing people have to do is...
No, yeah, you're right. He I think most people are screaming, no, he doesn't. We'll see.
That is reality. You may or may not be happy with it. Just parenthetically, I just did an hour of radio because I do a lot of hours that are not politics, and
Sure.
and it was about the subject because I'm writing a commentary on the Bible, and I'm finishing volume 4, in which I discuss on one verse: is there luck in life, or is everything God's will? I'm a deep believer in God, and of course I believe there's bad luck because that's reality. If you get a kidney stone, and I use that example, I don't believe God placed a kidney stone in your kidney. I believe that it was your crappy luck that you got a kidney stone. But
yeah, the crappy luck that God foresaw before the creation of the universe, because God's omniscient, knows and sees and everything, not surprised or shocked by anything. So one could make the argument, Dr. Prager, that God did place the kidney stone there, because if he wouldn't have created anything, there would be no kidney stones to be put in anywhere.
Let me just dig it, not to interrupt, but I want to make sure we know what you mean by luck. Do you mean by, let's imagine the prevalence of kidney stones is 2%, just for hypothetical, for our conversation. God created a world in which there's a 2% prevalence of kidney stones. You had the bad luck to be in the 2%. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. That's
okay. Now, why did God create the kidney stones to begin with?
Because God did not create perfect nature. I mean, trees can fall, avalanches can happen.
Okay.
It is our task to fight cancer and to be able to live with avalanches.
Got it.
The human...
What David Pagman should ask, well, why did God create it at all? Why did God create?
Being wanted to leave the Garden of Eden. That's my take on this.
So we could enjoy him.
Story.
And have kidney
rather
stones.
live in a free universe than in a perfect universe.
Okay.
Okay. So, but I'm glad you went through theology with me. Anyway, the only reason I raised this is I am not happy to acknowledge the power of bad luck or good luck. But
Mike Rose asked, did you see David Wood's video on the correlation between atheism growing and leftism growing? No, I haven't seen that, but I don't doubt there's a correlation. Is it causation? No. In the United States, I do think it is a causation. I think that many atheists who leaned right and then became atheists lean left. And I think they do that because so many atheists before them lean left, and so they want to belong in a new community. And they have to fill that hole in their heart, their hope, meaning, and purpose. They have to fill it with something, and they fill it with secular humanism or something like that, some type of activism, some type of thing that makes them feel good that they're helping humanity. There you go. I've explained it all.
It is the reality. I am not happy that 45% of young Americans say according to Pew, that they believe in free speech, but not for hate speech. It shows you how incoherent young people's thinking is, that they don't understand that the whole point of free speech is to allow speech that you can't stand.
Yes. Amen. 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 Hallelujah. Praise the God I don't believe in. Prager's God that I don't believe in. This is a key point. The whole point of free speech is to allow hate speech. Now, are there exceptions? Yes, there's exceptions. But in general principle, the point of free speech is to allow people to say things that you don't like. And when it comes to hate speech, who is the decider of what's hate speech and what's not? The goal of free speech is to allow people to say things that will make you cry for hours. And if you don't like that, then I would say you don't like free speech. For me to say to Dennis Prager, I think the God that you believe in, portrayed in the Old Testament, is a schmuck, a terrible entity, and you ought not worship him. Dennis Prager is stable enough as a human being to say, Doug, PineCreek should have the right to say that Yahweh is a schmuck. And if he's real, he's not worthy of worship. Dennis Prager is man enough to say, I support PineCreek for the ability to say that. Now, a weak-kneed Jew, a Jew that's not confident in who he is or her, she is, would say, oh, wait, no, hate speech, anti-Semitic. Oh, no, Doug should be canceled for saying Yahweh is a schmuck. He's anti-Semitic. That's a weak Jew who doesn't value free speech. And by the way, for the record, I love the Jews. That's not hate speech because it has the word love in it. Love. I sincerely do. Every Jew I've met, I've loved. No, not really liked. Okay, really liked. Love is reserved in my family for family. And very, very close friends, but mostly family.
Okay, I'm a Jew. If you don't think the Holocaust happened, you're a liar, you are sick, you are perverted, but you are allowed to say it. By the way, you're not allowed in most European countries. You can be imprisoned for denying the Holocaust.
Yeah, and to be clear...
Yeah, and to me that's stupid. Someone should have the right to say, I deny the Holocaust, and not be put in jail for it. I mean...
I'm a Jew as well, and I believe exactly what you just said.
I believe you.
Okay.
I had a feeling you would. But just know your side is as opposed to free speech, as more opposed than ever any segment of Americans has ever been. We are living through the greatest crisis of free speech in American history. That poll is an example. Here's another one.
Okay.
25% of Americans aged 40 and over have never been married, as opposed to 8% in 1980.
And they're mostly Democrats. Truth.
We went from 8 to 25% in 40 years.
Can we talk about that one a little more? That one I find interesting. I'm not 40, but I'm in a long-term relationship.
39.
I have a baby. I'm not married. It's a conscious...
He's a Jew living in sin.
...decision I've made, evaluating what is marriage in 2023. Is that the sort of contract I'm interested in? Do I need that to mediate my relationship with my girlfriend? Are there protections that I find necessary? I don't know that for me and for so many other people I know that are probably in the group you're sort of describing here. I don't know that it's any kind of moral commentary or a commentary on the nature of relationships, but more about, for most of human history, this sort of contract didn't exist. There was a period where it peaked. I think it was the 50s or 60s or 70s. It seems to be in decline. It's sort of a blip. I don't know that it's that indicative of the broader point you're trying to make, Dennis.
It's funny you should say this. I went to a wedding last Sunday night, and my wife just spoke to the woman who got married.
Yeah.
And they had lived together for about 4 years. And she said, everything feels different. And I always explain to people, you use the word girlfriend. So you'll just have to take my word for it.
Please.
That you would be conveying a very different image of yourself and your relationship if you said my wife.
I agree.
Oh, okay. I think that.
Yeah. Anybody who's been married or is married now know exactly what Dennis Prager is talking about. He's resonating with a lot of people. There's a huge difference dating someone for even 5 years, calling them boyfriend, girlfriend, and then getting married, and then this is my wife, this is my husband. It's completely different feeling. And it's because culturally, historically, that means something different. That you made an oath to the government or to your friends, family, depending on what your oath was. But usually it's sickness to death, do us part, we remain faithful, that sort of thing. My wife and I, our vows had something to do with, I give you all that I am and all that I have. And I remind my wife of that every day. I say, that chocolate cake, that chocolate cookie, can I have a bite? No. Well, remember our vows? I'll give you all that I have. And then we both laugh.
Is a worthy commitment that human beings should make. I would like you have a child, I believe.
Yes, indeed.
I'd like the child to believe mommy and daddy are husband and wife, not just boyfriend and girlfriend. It's better for the kid, better for you, and better for the world.
But why do you think then that this marriage thing was the sort of more prevalent status for such a tiny blip in human history, and now it's already diminishing?
Well, I mean, the Bible was written 3,000 years ago, and everybody got married. I don't know why you call it a blip in history. It's universal. People got married in virtually every civilization.
Well, so if we consider modern humanity 250,000 years, for most of time, humans were not getting married.
All right. Look, if I can't talk about.
Good point by David Pakman. Like, what was marriage for 250,000 years ago? There was probably no marriage. You think there was actually consent with coitus 250,000 years ago? I mean, a big male Homo sapien 250,000 years ago, just coming out of the common ancestry with Neanderthals, saw a good-looking female and humped her. You think it was a movie and a dinner first? Like, rape was probably the norm. Or maybe there was some type of, like, even before we developed vocal cords, there was some type of consent. Like, the hairy guy looked at the hairy girl and said, That was the consent back then.
Pre-Stone Age or pre Bronze Age man.
Okay, fair.
Okay, since the Bronze Age, people have gotten married, and you know what? We've done better by every metric. Marriage makes a better person and a better world.
Yeah, what I see is commitment between two parents and probably a fair amount of economic stability are really the ideal circumstances. But I think I don't want to get away from your broader point, Dennis, which I think is you're recognizing the reality of the situation.
And I'm fighting it.
And you're fighting it.
And I'm fighting it because I believe that graduating high school.
If you just got here, you're probably wondering, why is this secular humanist, David Pakman, talking to this egregious liar named Dennis Prager? It's because David Pakman is a reasonable person, unlike so many secular humanist atheists.
Getting a job and getting married and getting married before you have a baby, that is almost the perfect recipe for a better life.
But going more broad on the other culture war issues I mentioned, you're 75. You've been at this for a while.
He's 75.
Don't you think that maybe it's simply being lost? Or let me ask it in a different way. What catalyst do you think might happen that might turn this thing around so that the so-called kind of anti-woke side wins or resurges?
Well, it's a great question, and I don't have a perfect answer. I do think that the chaos of the trans movement,
yes,
that people support the removal of girls' breasts when they're 18 or even sometimes younger, or boys getting castrated because they say they're girls.
Yep.
This has alarmed a fair number of people, even on your side.
Yeah, even on your side. I've heard Vosh say this, I've heard Destiny say this, I've heard, and these are just social media guys, but they have huge followings. I've heard a lot of people on the left admit this. The trans issue alone, is moving people to the right. They're realizing that, maybe stable homes with a mother and a father is the best way to go. Seems like kids are a little less crazy and more less susceptible to wanting their breasts removed or thinking they were born in the wrong body when they were raised in a stable home and have a sense of identity in who they are. Maybe traditions actually were something when it comes to self-worth and identity. Maybe religions were something when it comes to identity. And the trans movement or the trans issue is all about lack of identity or confusion of identity, or your identity is not matching your body or whatever.
Side of the spectrum. They realize this is madness. We have gone out of our minds. And I know why we've gone out of our minds. I don't think you would agree with my analysis, but it is I could put it to you in one sentence. It is a quote attributed to G.K. Chesterton, but we can't verify he said it. I'm only saying that because I didn't come up with this.
Okay.
When people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing. They believe in anything. And this trans movement is the proof. I said on Bill Maher's show 4 years ago, right before you saw that, it's gone viral.
I saw it.
He said,
Mike Rose asked, do you think being trans is a choice? The attribution, how you explain it, I think it is a choice. I've been giving this a lot of thought in the last year. And I'm more and more coming to the conclusion that trans doesn't even exist. The idea of, you got to define what trans is, but the idea that you're born in the wrong body has no scientific evolutionary basis. And it can be very easily attributed to just, more masculinity, less femininity, whatever. I'm coming to the conclusion that the transgenderism does not exist. I'm purposely gaslighting some people right now, and they can't handle it because they don't have any sense of identity. But the more I think about it, and I can be persuaded against that. And what would change my mind is we can actually have some type of objective tests. But now, to me, it's transgenderism is a false attribution. Vesna, did you want to come on in? Yeah, you do. Okay. I have a tea time. I got half an hour at best, and I got to pee because I've been going a while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Dennis Prager, David Pacman talk for 5 minutes while I go pee, and then I'll let you in, and maybe anybody else who wants to come on in.
Oh, Trump lies. I said, it doesn't compare to the lies of the left. America is systemically racist and men menstruate. And he cracked up, the whole audience cracked up, and the whole panel cracked up. They were all laughing at me. And Bill Maher said, this is why it's gone viral. There are like 10 million views of this particular scene. Where he says, Dennis, where'd you come up with that one? And that was 2019, the fall of 2019. And people go, what, are you nuts? Who says men menstruate? Within 2 years, if you denied men menstruate, you were considered transphobic.
Well, listen, I mean, I'm glad to have, I'm going to be honest. I don't know that this is the most interesting thing for us to talk about. But that being said, I have said very clearly, there are some areas, if we just say the world of trans issues, there are some areas where I feel quite confident. Like, for example, when it comes to bathrooms, I was just in Spain, beautiful country, terrific seafood. I recommend it to you, Dennis. The bathrooms are just gender neutral. There's a sink there and a bunch of stalls, and people cross in the sink to wash their hands, and you use the stall you want. Everything's fine. The bathroom issue, I genuinely do not care about, even when they are organized the way they are in the United States. Another example that really just does not seem like an issue to me. People want to be addressed by a different pronoun. I'm going to guess based on what I see. And if I get it wrong, I'm not insulting anyone. If someone tells me otherwise, I'll kind of just do my best. We can kind of negotiate these things. On some of this stuff, like a talking point I'm hearing a lot is so many trans people who go through gender affirming care regret it. And that's a sign that something is very wrong. When I research it, it seems it's under 1% that express regret. And for some of that 1%, it's temporary. So I'm ambiguous about what is the right thing to do in some of these areas. I'm open to hearing from you to the extent that I judge you to be a good faith participant in the conversation. I don't know the answer. With some sports, it
they're talking about sports. Yeah, my my stance on the sports is no biological men in female sports, women's sports, full stop. And then let people cry. Okay, let's bring Vesna in, or whoever else wants to come in. Like, there's no need to make exceptions. There's a reason why women's sports exist. The only reason why you would make an exception is for people's feelings. And if you're going to make the feelings argument, then you got to consider the feelings of the biological women. And there's more biological women than trans women, so net suffering, biological women win. But. What I said was just science. Okay, there's the link, Vesna. Hop in quickly. If suicide numbers in adults went up in people with gender dysphoria, would that change your mind? This is similar to the argument, why would Christians die for a lie? Many Christians died as martyrs. My question would be, how do you know they died for their belief in the resurrection? How do we know people died for being transgender? For being transgender, as opposed to being depressed, having other mental problems, that they were in the sex trade, that they were on drugs. I mean, it's very difficult. Okay, Vesna, what did you want to complain about?
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I closed the tab. So, well, one thing that you were talking about was consent.
Yeah.
Let's see. There were a couple of different things. Historically, like the history of humanity and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, I don't understand why Pac-Man is saying that marriage is a blip, because like anthropologists and historians and everybody knows that there's marriage in every culture. It might not always be exactly the same, but
Well, yeah, he's saying marriage is a blip in all of Homo sapiens history because we've lived 2 to 3 to 400,000 years as Homo sapiens, and only in modern history when we have records. Although, how would he know prior to that there wasn't some type of marriage? Yeah.
Yes, and in fact, what we do know, I mean, based on our best anthropological, I'm not an anthropologist, but I've read enough about it to know that humans are social beings. We're primates, and we know things from studying other primate groups and seeing that they have family bonds and kin bonds.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't have marriage certificates 50,000 years ago, but it would be very unexpected to not see marriage, something that we would call marriage. And they could tell these things from burial sites and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I think that
I think he's
Prager
wrong.
was wrong to accept that point.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about?
Okay, so then the other thing I wanted to talk about was, did you read my little anecdote that I put in the chat about the I guess you didn't, because you look like you haven't seen it.
No, I didn't.
Okay, so I knew this is about children having sex with each other.
Okay.
So I knew someone who told me that when he was 8, he and a group of other little kids his age snuck into the laundry room at the apartment complex and started having sex. And I was like, what?
Like
You mean
penetration?
actually? And yeah, and he described how he had an orgasm, but no fluid came out, I think he said. And it was like, kids messing around. They were like, oh, this thing, ooh. And then somebody came to a grown-up, encountered them and yelled at them all, and they all scattered. So somebody in the chat had said at one point, the only reason that kids would ever do this is because of abuse, but this did not sound to me like there was any abuse in this story. It was just kids messing around.
Yeah.
So
well, I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, I think I did this, or I saw another kid do this. I'll blame it on another kid. Barbie dolls? They would kids at 7, 8, 9 years old would often strip them naked and then grind the Barbie dolls together.
Oh yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Hey, that's kids being experimenting with things that adults do or that they've heard about, or
I'm glad you brought
They
this up
make them
because
smooch, or you
I wanted to, and you are a smart young lady, and
thanks. Well, the first part anyway.
and when I made that video, that the comment section was just out of control. My most recent video I
Yeah.
made with Matt Dillahunty, you were smart. And you asked, well, what's the point of this, Doug? What are you doing?
Yes.
And as soon as I explained it, you understood. And the issue was
Right.
that one section where Matt says that what was the exact wording? That he's basically very against 9-year-olds having coitus.
Massively, he said.
Yeah, massively, he said that.
Massively opposed.
And my question is, Kate, are you being consistent, Matt? Because the risks of puberty blockers to kids, to me, even if you say it's warranted in some situations and can be good and can be helpful and healthy, whatever, but you got to admit there's risks involved. Is it?
Sure.
Which is worse? I mean, kids, 2 9-year-olds going at it, or puberty blockers for kids? To me, it's a no-brainer. Yes. I say it's a landslide win for puberty blockers as being worse.
Yes. Now, I would say though that now I understand what your point is. Your video didn't make that point.
Well, it did because
it just confused everybody. No, it.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't make the point.
Right.
You made the point, and you're right. That was your point, but your video didn't make it. But people just lost their minds over your.
I know.
Over your video, they had no idea. They had no idea what you were getting at. Neither did I. So my response was to ask you.
Yes, and some you and a few others did. Most of them just had knee-jerk reactions. But that was my point: is to say Matt seems like he's morally outraged about 2 9-year-olds having coitus and couldn't get the Daniel's marriage with young girls out of his thick skull, and he was just obsessed with that. But I just think that I was making that correlation, that side by side juxtaposition. And
right.
the comment section just shows how easily it is. Like, and you're right. I didn't make it clear that this was my point, but the fact that I can so easily manipulate people to just have these knee-jerk reactions, like, this is what I want. I do this on purpose. Some people call it trolling, but I do this on purpose to train people that I can produce a video like that, and they just like, this is weird. Doug, what do you mean by this? I mean, and that's the response. If we can get society to that point where they don't have this like response, I mean, we're golden.
My friend, you are what we call a gadfly. You like that?
Maybe.
Oh man, I forgot my cigar.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
but explain what you mean by me being a gadfly.
What? Well, do you know what a gadfly is?
Or
do you just want to hear more because you like it?
I think I know where you're going, but go. And I got like, we're pressed for time here, so make it short and quick.
Oh, that's true. Well, it's you sort of buzz around and come up with these ideas that get people all worked up, and perhaps you don't mean them literally, but you sort of say, well, what if we'll consider this part, consider that part, and then people get all worked up.
Yeah.
And it exposes people's cognitive dissonances are laid bare, because you poke people in places where they haven't put on armor yet. They haven't put on their gadfly insect repellent.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've said this on my poker nights, like people who get offended by me easily or get a rise, I say something and then they get charged in some way. Mm-hmm. They typically are not my close friends. Like
I think not.
My closest friends are I can say the most outrageous thing and they go, huh, and they don't have no reaction. It's like, okay, now you can be my friend. Like, you've passed the test. You're more dead inside. I can't manipulate you. If you're easily manipulated, I don't want you as my friend. If you know who you are and you're stable and I cannot manipulate your feelings, then you're in my inner circle.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good not a bad metric.
You
So
want to be
what
in my inner
do you
circle?
think that yeah, but I would love to play poker.
Oh, really?
I don't have money though. Yeah.
Oh, well,
How do
yeah.
you get
Um,
how do you get in there?
oh, you got money.
No.
Let me see your closet. If you
Okay.
got more than 3 pairs of shoes, you got money.
Oh, well, I mean, I have the shoes, but not the money. Do I look sideways now?
No, you're perfectly vertical.
Really? Okay.
No,
Are
you're
you sure?
90 degrees off.
Okay. So, there we go. All right. So, anyway, so this is as close as I have to a
Oh, candy. No, you got to have the real cigars.
I know, candy cigarettes, but a blast from the past, huh?
Yeah,
Remember
I remember as a
remember that?
9-year-old when I was having coitus. After I was done coitus as a 9-year-old, I would smoke those.
Oh, good one. So, do you think that why can't I show this thing?
Last question, then
Do
I
you
got to go.
think that okay, do you think that Matt Dillahunty would be massively opposed to that story? To what my friend and his
No,
little Spanky R gang did?
no, I don't
Do
think
you
he would
think
be.
he just
I think the only reason why he said that is because of the situation and context he was in. And I'm
okay?
not even convinced he put it together that Daniel was talking with 2 9-year-olds. He heard it and then it kind of just went out of his brain, and then
Right.
child rape marriage came back into his brain very quickly.
He wasn't really listening because and he even said, okay, so ask the question again, that he wasn't hearing the question in the first place. And then I think you're right that he didn't actually answer the question that was being asked, which is so just to throw this out there, I'm just so disappointed in him because I used to admire him so much. I used to think that he was like sort of a well, we don't have Christopher Hitchens anymore, but we have Matt Dillahunty, and he's fighting the good fight of reason and objectivity and
If Matt Dillahunty took
drilling down.
if he took my Dead Inside class and my insensitivity training, I could make him so much better. But he does appeal to people emotional like himself. So if you're an emotional atheist who just wants to cry and yell and scream about injustices in the world and let people manipulate you with your with feelings and emotions, he's your guy.
But Christopher Hitchens was emotional. He was emotional, but he I don't think that his tool was being dead inside.
Yeah,
He
no,
took
he
that
was
emotion and he made it into a pile driver.
Yeah, well, there's no comparison between Dillahunty and Hitchens. Like Dillahunty is like a child compared to Hitchens, but
yeah, everybody is.
Yeah, I agree. Hitchens was more emotional than me, for example, but it was still way less than Dillahunty, and he, like you said, he focused it, and he had this dry British wit that just cut through all the bullshit. I mean, he was brilliant at what he did, and he is evidence that that style is probably way more effective than facts and evidence. Like, he was very well read. He was very well read, but he could change people's minds without even presenting evidence. Like, just his confidence and his wit and his humor. Like, even people who hated Hitchens loved him because, like, I was a Christian when I first heard Hitchens, and I thought he was brilliant and entertaining, and he was engaging. I wanted to watch him and listen to him, even though I disagreed with him. Dillahunty, I guess you could say the same thing, but it's more that people are laughing at him. On the opposite side, I'm not talking about people who already, believe what he believes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I don't think that certainly not. I never thought that Dillahunty was on his level, but I did think that he was picking up and carrying the same torch. But lately, I mean, with his, I mean, and that tantrum that he threw on that show, it's like, what the heck?
And standing up,
happened
going
to
to
him?
Daniel, like, come here and say that.
Yeah,
Okay.
like, hey, you want a piece of me? Come on. What? Is he 12? Maybe he hasn't gotten any good Maybe he hasn't gotten any good coitus lately. If
Careful
he's
now.
not actually.
Oh, I didn't play that part.
gay.
Oh, there was a part where Daniel asked Matt if he's gay, and Matt said no.
I thought you did play that part because you
Did
were
I play
talking
that?
about Seinfeld. Yeah, and then I posted a comment that said it's like Jerry saying, I'm not gay. I'm not gay. I just like to fuck George.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Not
I
that
did
there's
play that.
anything wrong with that.
Yeah, but when I heard that the first time, I looked up the definition of gay, and I thought maybe I'm missing something. But it's the attraction to the same sex, and transgenderism is not about changing sex. So
right, but the woke, for want of a better word, want to change that definition to mean same gender attracted. And that is how a lot of men are trying to get into lesbians' pants. Are you aware of this?
yeah, I'm aware of the
Yeah, the
same
cotton
gender
sealing and all
attracted.
that.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, there are people who are legitimately whatever, but there are also predators who use this as a um oh,
Yeah.
I got to take a call and you got to go
I gotta go
catch
golf.
a pee. Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for
Yeah, definitions are changing so rapidly. And now I guess the better question is asked, do you prefer vaginas or penises, right? Instead of saying, are you homosexual, heterosexual? Are you gender attracted, opposite sex attracted? I mean, just let's get straight to the point. Do you prefer penises or vaginas? To me, I'm a vagina guy. V for victory, V for vagina. To me, like, penises are disgusting. Ugh. Ugh. Okay, 2 minutes. Jerome, what's your problem? PineCreek. You trying to hurt my feelings? You cannot manipulate me. This is where secularism leads you. Total confusion. S for Sharia to solve all problems. I agree with you that secularism can lead to confusion. Mostly with this identity issue, traditions. But I don't think Sharia is the solution. And here's why. Whenever you attach a creator God, an omnipotent being, to a set of laws that humans are encouraged to use because God said so, it gives an extra gravitas, an oomph that says, my confidence is so high that you ought to do this, and if you don't, death or punishment, whatever. If you say it's not from God, but more a human construct of what's best for society, it leads you to say that you might be wrong. You're more likely to say, I'm mistaken about this. But if you say God gave this to us, then you can't say I'm mistaken. This is very dangerous when people are so certain about something. Now, Elias, I know you're a smart guy and you understand this pushback. And in your mind, you're thinking, yes, this atheist is making a good point. Now, you just believe that it is from God, it is true, it is right. But you understand the point that this overconfidence can be dangerous. Can I get an amen from a Muslim? If you own your own children, are you responsible for their actions? Yes, I am. I'm actually, yeah, I could speak volumes on that. Poof. Dennis Prager was scheduled to come onto this program, but we ran out of time. Actually, Matt Dillahunty was also scheduled to come on, but we ran out of time. Just time is an issue.